Hey guys, I'm Anna, and this is Unruly. Today I'm here with Yael, Averbuch West, former professional soccer player across many leagues, and current general manager and head of soccer operations for Gotham Football Club, which is New York and New Jersey's National Women's Soccer League team. Yael, thank you so much for coming today.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Can you, I guess just to start off, can you tell me what kind of brought you to your current role at Gotham?
Absolutely. So, yeah, ever since I'm from this area, from New Jersey, ever since I was basically on my first rec soccer team, soon after that, I decided I wanted to be a professional soccer player. That's all I ever wanted to do. So I didn't have a vision for, being in a role like general manager at that point. But after my playing career and kind of towards the later stages of it, I was very involved in kind of transitioning what I had learned on the field into various things off the field. And so, yeah, being from the area and really being a supporter of the club, and it was my first professional club as a player. I am very invested in making it something that the world can be proud of and kind of fostering the soccer community that raised me and bringing it kind of all full circle. So it's been a really fun time and trying to let everybody know about Gotham FC.
I think with that, like, it feels like we're kind of in the midst of this big cultural change, and the hype around women's sports is much more prevalent than it has been in years prior, and seems to really have picked up. I think, like, considering obviously women's sports have always existed, and there are always like countless iconic moments that have existed throughout history, maybe not really got the attention that they deserved at the time. Why do you think this is finally happening now?
It's a really interesting question. I've thought about this a lot because, yeah, having been involved in the game, I think of as players, we were doing the same things as the players now. But the platform and the opportunity in women's sports in general, and what I've just seen in women's soccer, really has, what I thought was the ceiling, we've blown through it. And it's been wonderful to see. I think there were a number of factors, especially when I look at the NWSL in particular in women's soccer. And I really think that COVID was a big and important turning point.
That's interesting.
And yeah, and I've thought about this a lot. NWSL was one of the first leagues back. Believe maybe the first league back, and it was during a time when there were a lot of statements being made by the players and the women's soccer community about, things off the field and the social justice movement. And there were a lot of really important cultural moments that NWSL was front and center in, and the players did a wonderful job, I think, of standing up and making their voices be heard. And we saw it in the WNBA too. And so I think that was really pivotal for women's sports. And then, off the back of that, I do think there has been a big momentum and recognition that there is significant entertainment value and that there's a business opportunity to be had in women's sports. In the past, I think when you thought of ownership groups or investment in women's sports, it had been talked about almost like a donation or a charity. And now it's being seen as an investment opportunity, and business people are interested in growing their business portfolios by looking at women's sports. And the change in the type of ownership groups coming into women's sports and NWSL specifically, and even, at Gotham FC with Next 3 and Carolyn Tish-Blodgett coming on, it sends a message to everyone else. These are really smart, powerful business people. And they are looking at women's sports as the next investment or the next area of their growth.
And I think it's kind of funny too, because I mean, the U.S. women's national team has, I can't obviously say always been good, but they've been consistently dominating the scene, I'd say. But where do you think the hype was around that? Like, I think it very much lived within like the context of the Olympics and like World Cups and so forth. But especially since soccer isn't necessarily like a huge thing in the US, do you think that had something to do with it?
Yeah, I think it's huge. But the U.S. women's national team has such a powerful following and a lot of really household names, which is what you need to kind of make a sport mainstream. But like you mentioned, there's a tournament every 4 years or a big event every couple years, and it's event based. It's not all the time. It's not week in, week out. And so what NWSL has now done is brought that same level of star power and talent into local markets. So people have local teams they can support. The games are happening every week, sometimes twice a week. And it's a new model, and it's a different way to follow the sport and follow the game. And I think for a lot of Americans love the chance to be world champions and win an Olympic gold medal or a World Cup. But there is something larger with soccer, and I think it's really starting to translate into the fandom on the regular basis. But it's been very interesting to watch that transition.
How do you think that the NWSL can make people care about those local teams?
Yeah, it's a very good question. This is a conversation we have at Gotham all the time, and that the league is having. I think there's a few things. One is just awareness. In the youth soccer market, I grew up, and so I grew up in the area where Gotham is, and the number of top local elite youth soccer clubs is extraordinary. There are players, parents, coaches, fans of the game, young adults who know about the sport of soccer and don't yet know about Gotham. And so there's a lot of work to do to raise that awareness. But I think also, with sports, people want to understand rivalries. They want household names. They want to know who they're watching and why they should care. Mm-hmm. They have to know, about Esther Gonzalez and her story. They have to know and understand who the people are and start to connect with that. And I think similarly, like rivalries really draw attention. And currently our rival is kind of the Washington Spirit, so we're building up that rivalry, and we get a lot of attention on that game, but we need more of it.
I have a kind of funny question. You just mentioned Washington Spirit being a main rival. Do you almost work with them to make the rivalry more potent?
So yeah, it's a funny question. Yeah, a little bit. I think it's in everyone's best interest to build up the rivalry, and so we're all competitive people, and we obviously want to win the game, and we want to have more fans than other teams. But from a business sense, a full stadium, wherever we're going, if it's home or away, is important. Mm-hmm. It's important to have people watching the game. We all want the same thing when it comes to that. The result in the field is where, obviously we're trying to get the better of one another, but absolutely it's a team effort at the same time as it is a competition.
Mm-hmm. I do think that despite all this very incredible momentum, the infrastructure around women's sports hasn't really risen to meet the moment yet. And I'd kind of love to break down some of those key components of that. So for starters, what needs to change about stadium infrastructure to meet demands? And what is so complicated about that? I know that, for instance, what was formerly Red Bull Arena, where Gotham played, is now Sports Illustrated Stadium. Does that kind of help make it feel more like your own home?
It does a little bit, but you bring up a great point, is that the interest, the investment, everything with women's sports and women's soccer is on the rise, and it's accelerating so quickly that to professionalize everything supporting it is a huge challenge. Mm-hmm. And then you think about a stadium and showing up for a home game, and a big push that our business team at the club has done is to make it look like Gotham. But it's a huge stadium. Mm-hmm. So if you think about all the things that need to come in from a temporary basis to brand it as Gotham, it's a significant effort. And that's been a big focus over the last couple of years. You want the players and staff to feel like they're at home. You want people on their way into the stadium to realize it's Gotham game day. And so just, that alone, I think, has a big impact. But yeah, when you don't own your own stadium, your guests and our equipment managers are bringing the equipment back and forth, and there's all kinds of considerations that you don't really think of, but it is part of it, and it's part of we see now a few clubs have. Kansas City Current has led the way in terms of having the first women's-specific soccer stadium. That's an incredible moment.
I'd love to know your thoughts on the relationship between the way women's sports are presented and how people kind of respond to them.
Yeah. So the hardcore women's sports fans are going to find the games, and I think we're at the point now where there has been a push and a momentum to where they're available, which is it's an improvement over when I was playing. I think about how my parents couldn't watch many of my games. Yeah. If they weren't the few televised games, even my family couldn't watch, let alone fans, people who might invest, businesses who might sponsor. It wasn't out there.
It was on ESPN 17. Yeah.
Or people would be streaming something on something. You'd have to find some strange link somewhere. And so I think the availability of the games and the broadcast has improved significantly. That being said, you walk into, I don't really follow other sports. I'm a soccer person. But if I turn on the TV for 1 second, if I walk into a bar, I'm being bombarded by it.
Yeah.
It's just on the screen. It's being talked about. It's on my social media. I don't have to choose if I know about the players. They're being sent my way all day. And that is different than women's sports. For women's sports, you have to go seek it out. You have to go talk to the lobby of the hotel and ask them to change the channel to put on the women's game, or, the bar, the restaurant, wherever it might just have something on. And that, I think, really makes a difference. I think just the fact that when things are on in the background, or when you can't help but see them, it changes the nature of the public awareness. So I think that's the next level for where women's sports needs to go. And we're not there yet. To your point, sometimes it is a little bit difficult to find the games. They're there if you want to find them, and people do want to find them, which is great. But, how do we get it to the point where you can't avoid them, even if you don't want to find them?
Yeah, yeah. On a personal level, how does this moment make you feel? I think in my head, the politically correct thing to say would be like, we're happy and we're thankful, but are you kind of like pissed off at all that it's taken this long, or that maybe you couldn't engage in this momentum when you were a player?
That's really interesting. I've thought of that. I'm like, is there any way in which I feel kind of like I maybe personally missed out on something? I will say, I share this openly because I think it is important. In my 10th year as a professional player, having been on the U.S. women's national team a bit, I made $21,000 in my playing contract. Wow. And so at the time I thought that was good. But now that I think about it, I was very stressed. I started a business on the side. I was coaching players in the hot sun the day before the game because I had to make extra money. It's really different now for our players, and I feel very proud of that. I recognize the time that I took part, and actually feel really proud of hopefully playing an important role in moving the game to where it is now, as have many players who have advocated and stuck with it and made the product good, even when people weren't watching or weren't paying. The thing I look at now is the support and what it takes to be supported to actually perform at your best. And there's still a long way to go. But with everything from the physical training, the access to recovery tools, the access to the performance and medical, especially what we have at Gotham, it's really next level. The type of testing our athletes go through to maximize their individual athletic potential, to flag risks of injury. And we have a full-time mental performance coach. We have a chef and performance nutritionist. And I think about just all the other things that go into the experience to allow you to perform on the field, which, like I said, we still have room to grow, certainly in women's sports, women's soccer at Gotham. But I think what I could have really benefited from a sports psychologist. I could have really benefited from someone looking at my athletic profile. I'm tall and lanky. I shouldn't be doing the same training as like a short, explosive player. And I was working so hard, but didn't have the same type of support our players have, coaches breaking down nuances of video, even in training.
Yeah.
And it's normal. This is what men have had in sports for years and years, but it is newer in women's soccer. And that's the part that I feel a little bit like, I wonder if I played now, how much better of a player would I have been? And that, I could never answer it, but that has gone through my head.
I was actually listening to an interview you did with ESPN about a year ago, and in it, you said that you didn't feel like you accomplished what you wanted to as a player, which I thought was very honest and interesting. And do you still feel that way?
Yeah, I think maybe it'll fade over time. I mean, I wanted to play in a World Cup and play in the Olympics. My goal was I wanted to be the best women's soccer player in the world. I can only say that now. I would have been embarrassed to say that kind of towards the tail end of my playing career.
Why would you be embarrassed about it?
Well, because I wasn't that. There was some gap. If you look at, everyone in the world, and I said that, and they looked at my career resume, I looks like I got really close. But when you're in it and you're not getting called in with the national team and you wanted to be the captain of that team, it feels like the gap is so big. So as a player, yeah, I think I had goals on my list that I didn't accomplish. Now looking back, I feel very proud of who I was as a player and how I was respected by other top players I played with. But yeah, I have unfinished business that I will not be able to finish on the field. But I get an incredible amount of joy from seeing the players at Gotham succeed and seeing others live the dream and go so much further beyond what I was able to as a player. I watch our team play, and I mean, what the players are doing on the field is so far beyond what I was able to do as a player, and it's really impressive. And I'm very proud of it. But I have some things on my to-do list I never did.
Do you think that that's purely just the monetary investment? Meaning these things that, for example, as you just mentioned, the Gotham players are able to do now. Is that, I mean, I would imagine it's not just them physically being more capable. I mean, maybe they have become physically more capable because of monetary investment.
Yeah, I do think investment in the women's game has helped to create a depth of talent. Like it was always competitive in the US, and we always had a lot of talent in the US, but now there's a league full of talent rather than a player pool for the US women's national team only. And then you look around the globe, and it's really struck me with our scouting department is even from the time I started this role about 4.5 years ago now till now, the depth of talent in the world game is significantly, significantly stronger.
Mm-hmm.
You see young, exciting players coming up. There's a transfer market where clubs are paying real money to get talented players. And I think the investment in the game has changed that. When there's money on the line and when there is an investment in the players have always worked hard
Yeah.
and always competed. But when there's some reward on the other side of that, it increases the competition. It increases the ruthlessness of the decisions. And I think it's a spiral. So I certainly think investment has played a role, especially I'd say in the world game, there's always been some catch up to play with the US. And I think we're seeing that pay off.
Meaning the world is trying to catch up with the US or vice versa?
I think so. I think in the world game, investment, especially in the national teams, like the U.S. women's national team has historically had, even when that team has had to fight for better standards, better pay, they have been kind of the one that everyone else is trying to follow. Preparation for major tournaments, investment in youth national teams that lead to the senior national team. And so, yeah, I think the world, in a lot of ways, is playing catch up to where the U.S. has been. From a league standpoint, that's a bit different because NWSL, I still do think is part of leading the way, but there are other top clubs around the world in the women's game that are really investing pretty significantly now compared to what was in the past.
Do you know what's funny is I think everything you just said makes a lot of sense. It feels like the complete opposite for the men's side, meaning I feel as though the men's team is trying to play catch up with the rest of the world. And what does it mean to you that soccer is the sport here that is leading the way from a women's perspective?
Yeah, that's very interesting because that's true historically. That there's a huge history of the game, the men's game in other places, and we're young in comparison to that in the U.S. on the men's side, and kind of the opposite on the women's side. We were one of the first, and we kind of started the trend. I think NWSL and the US's role in women's soccer it fundamentally changes the global landscape of the game. So if you look at the men's game, the top talent, the top clubs are in Europe. And then there are emerging leagues competing to be right underneath that. And I'd say MLS is taking players from some of those clubs at the later stages of their career and developing players to maybe go sign for a really big club in Europe. And in the women's game, NWSL is right up there with the top leagues in Europe and elsewhere. And so I think, I'd say even North America, like the league in Mexico, they've just launched a league in Canada on the women's side. There really is a global landscape developing in the women's game that's very different because of NWSL's role in the women's game and being right at the top with, a couple of, I'd say there's a couple other European leagues kind of leading the way alongside, especially in England right now. But it's definitely, it's very different, and it's kind of is flipped on its head.
Yeah. I mean, I remember watching the last Women's World Cup, and it felt like there was so much pressure surrounding the women's team's performance because it almost felt like we had finally garnered that mass audience base, and which also included a lot of men. And that if we didn't do well, we might lose the audience base. Is that like pressure to constantly perform at a level of excellence to keep audiences interested something you feel?
I think I think that comes with, being at the top, and like the target is on our back. No no other I think soccer country in the world expects to win the World Cup, and anything less than winning the World Cup is failure, really. I mean, that's a unique position to be in. There might be a couple hopeful teams on the men's side, but that's the reality, is that the US women's national team is expected to win the gold medal and win the World Cup. And if they don't, even losing in the championship or getting to the semifinal is disappointing. And that's a privileged position to be in. But yes, it's an incredible amount of pressure. And I do think for many years, the success of the women's national team in the US, and still now, really does, it correlates to the level of interest. Like if we're going to get a big buzz, we need to have success in that tournament. We need to have a new star emerge in that tournament who's going to hopefully play for an NWSL club. And those are things we talk about. But we're moving in that direction. But it is an incredible amount of pressure, as you said, and it has a significant influence on the game and the viewership in NWSL, and kind of the spike we get or don't get based on the performance of the U.S. women's national team.
Kind of getting into a little bit more in the conversation around, like, I don't want to say men versus women, but that tends to be where things go. I feel like a lot of times the gut instinct is to target men as a desired audience, because I think fortunately or unfortunately, we've culturally given them the power to determine whether or not a women's sport is valid. But then I think about the audience for men's sports, and I don't think that those are equally distributed by gender either. Who should we be targeting as an audience for women's sports?
I think we're still learning that, and I definitely don't think it's just men or just women. I think it's also incorrect to think that only women are interested. So I think, either way, to me, 50-50. I do think men should be and are interested in women's sports, especially at the highest level. You're watching the top players in the world compete. It's extremely entertaining. There's great stories. There are other rivalries emerging. There are these wonderful household names. I believe it's about building in households, and it's about building a culture and a legacy that you pass down, is that you're going to be a Gotham supporter because your dad and your mom were Gotham supporters. And that's what we haven't yet seen, because we haven't been around long enough for that. But I think that's where it needs to go. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I don't think about it in terms of who we're targeting outside of. I think family legacy is very important in terms of targeting, and to start to build it young, and to have young soccer players have an affinity towards an affiliation with Gotham, a feeling of like that they recognize the brand, that they went to a Gotham game, got their face painted, whatever was fun about it.
I heard the face painting at the Gotham games.
It's legit. Glitter, everything. I haven't done it yet myself, but yes. But I think that's where it starts, because one day that young boy or young girl will have a positive feeling and a memory where they will want to take their family or their significant other, their whoever it is, to a game because they have a positive memory about it. And that takes a really long time to build.
Definitely. And I think, like, when women are building up their version of something in comparison to men's, they want to mimic the way the men have done it. But I think with women's sports, it almost seems like a miss to do that, because, as you just said, like, I think the family legacy thing is so important. And when I think about, too, like, for example, I know that the New York Liberty the WNBA team has really capitalized on bringing in families, because, I mean, you can't afford to bring like a 5-person family to a Knicks game. Like, that's like $2,000, you know what I mean? But with the Liberty, like, I know that they've really been trying to focus on bringing in families and how that audience kind of looks different. Should we be kind of creating our own measures for success, as opposed to just trying to compare where women's sports are to men's?
I think so. I think it's a little bit of everything. For the same reason somebody would want to go watch a top men's sporting event, that still exists on the women's side. Like, what's happening on the field, the court, the arena, whatever it is that enticing, and you're there to watch a really, a wonderful competition, a wonderful display of talent and ability. And at the same time, it can look very different. And I think you make some good points. Women's soccer in particular, and I think women's sports, is appealing to a lot of people because it's very inclusive. If people don't feel welcome in other sporting environments, a women's soccer game is a place where everyone can feel welcome. You can come as you are. You can bring whoever you love and you are welcome. And you're not just welcome, but you're embraced and celebrated. And that is a bit unique to women's sports. But I think as women's sports emerges as a business and continues to, well, it's emerged as a business, it's on the map, continues to, I'd say, evolve as a business, we're going to learn a lot more and learn the ways in which it is differentiated. And like you said, we need unique KPIs. And also the ways in which nothing changes. The sport is a sport and you're there to watch top competition and you should know kind of and learn when to cheer and be there to actually watch the game too. So all of it can be true. And I think that's what's beautiful about it is that it doesn't have to be one or the other.
I love how you think of this as like being very much like a narrative, like how you're, for example, when you mentioned the rivalries, not inventing them, but really like kind of putting pressure on them and building those up. And I think too, I know all over TikTok right now, I'm seeing videos of fights happening like during WNBA games and how that's like really in the comment section people are saying, oh, this is so good for the WNBA. Is it all just about is it just about storytelling almost that you think that where we need that boost?
I think storytelling is powerful. Like, what are you watching? Why should you be interested? And what would make you really care and feel it on a deeper level? I think that's important. Like inspiration, people spend money on things that they're inspired by that empower them. It's more than just wanting a team to win just because. Like only the players on the field probably and me and the coaches care that much about the result of each game, but it's the feeling that it evokes. And that's why I do think narratives are really important. When you follow Gotham FC, why do you care? What are you following? What do we stand for? Why are you part of our family as opposed to anything else you could focus on or spend your time on? And I think it needs to evoke a deep feeling of belonging, of impact, of importance, and of the desire to conquer and lift trophies and have the Gotham badge. When you wear your Gotham jersey in Europe or South America, wherever you go, that people say like, "Oh, what's that? Oh, yeah, that's wow, you support Gotham. Interesting." So there is something broader, and I think the narrative is very important, and it gives people a feeling of I'd say inspiration and empowerment to be part of something and to feel that by supporting it, you are part of a family.
One thing I think is interesting, and I think this is just a US thing, it feels like basketball just has more of an infrastructure in American lives than soccer does. I just don't even know. I don't know how you build that up,
I think it takes time. Like if you just think about culturally, there are basketball courts everywhere. Like there's been a push to actually put little soccer goals on basketball courts. But when kids are growing up, especially on the men's and boys side, you can make a lot of money. So that could be it's an exciting thing to try to pursue. There are courts everywhere. So, you're hanging out with friends or whatever. You have a basketball, like you're playing basketball. People aren't really doing that with soccer in the US. It's not the same. And similarly too, when you think about historically, people have grown up for generations seeing parents wearing basketball jerseys, and are they even called jerseys?
Yeah.
I'm using soccer lingo.
No,
I think it's
jerseys.
Yeah,
yes.
jersey.
I feel like I think the only main difference is with soccer the kits.
Kit, yeah. I wouldn't say a basketball kit. I'm not gonna say that. Okay. Yeah, I'm like, it's called a jersey though. I had to check myself on that. But it's just like you recognize the logos and stuff. And I think soccer is I think it takes a lot of years and it takes generational passing things down, kids recognizing something because their parent wore it or talked about it or watched it on TV. Basketball has been available to watch on TV, has been talked about on ESPN Sports Center
forever.
Forever, for years and years. And soccer hasn't yet. But it's just part of what you do. It's part of what I'm sure was on TV and what gets talked about at the dinner table. And I think, I think in some families, soccer is like that already, but there's a lot of competing interests in the US, whereas soccer is the sport everywhere else in the world. It's basketball, football, baseball combined. Mm-hmm. So we have competing interests, but also a long history, I think, to catch up to.
Does I guess this general rise in popularity feel palpable to you in your everyday life, like aside thinking of people you interact with outside of the sports world.
It does to some extent. I've always been really immersed in a world and a community that appreciates women's soccer, and way before anyone else did. I think in the family in which I was raised, and the youth soccer community that raised me, always felt like this about the women's game, which is really special. And I realize now how special it was. But, I was saying before we started recording, I was walking with my kids the other day on a day off, and I had my Gotham shorts on, and we stopped at a lemonade stand, and which is where a lemonade and bracelet stand, which is where I got this. But, the people there, actually one of the girls making lemonade said, "Oh, do you play for Gotham?" Which I was honored. She thought I was a player first. She didn't say, "Do you work for Gotham?" Probably because I was wearing a very sportsy outfit. But then they knew Gotham, and they recognized the logo. I didn't say anything. I didn't have a soccer ball with me. And then we had a conversation. And then when we came back
You didn't
by,
have a speech ready.
yeah, no, I didn't have a speech. We came back by, one of their neighbors had said, "Oh, can you get an autograph?" They didn't know who I was, but like, get an autograph. I was like, "You told them I'm not a player, right?" But there is a recognition. I see Gotham stickers in people's cars. I see things around that do make me feel really proud and impressed about the progress we've made. I still think there's so much room to go with it. But I feel very blessed in the sense that my paradigm all along since I was 7 years old and began the sport was, this is the most important thing. This is the world game that people are paying attention to, and you could start your journey here and be a world star. That's what I always thought was possible, which is very powerful. But it is really true, is that the recognition and the attention of what we're doing, the following on social media, all of it is at a totally different level than what it has been historically.
I guess like kind of switching gears a little bit. I know that the NWSL recently signed a new CBA last year, meaning collective bargaining agreement. What's in the contract? Like, what's the significance of that?
It's a really significant change in terms of how the league is run. And I'd say the biggest thing has to do with there's essentially complete free agency now, which has happened much quicker than MLS. And the interesting thing for women's soccer is that NWSL and MLS are both they're both part of the American sports model. So you have the college draft and trades and the kind of that feeling, an all-star game, and not yet an NWSL, but that feeling, but also are part of a world game and landscape that doesn't have any of that, where you sign a contract and either you decide, mutually decide at some point to make a change, or you wait till your contract's up and then you sign another contract. And you, as a player, you would never get traded. That's just not part of the idea that you would get distributed in a draft situation, just get picked by a team. That doesn't happen anywhere in the world game of soccer.
The word that came to mind while you were describing all that was just autonomy.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you describe it too?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of, players have autonomy now over their playing situations and the ability to negotiate with whichever team they see fit as free agents, which it changes, from a club perspective. It changes how we evaluate our roster, how we identify talent, how we recruit, and everything. The way we think about ourselves is we need to be a destination where people want to be. We can't just bank on having their rights and forcing them to stay. Not that we would do that anyway.
Yeah.
But it really, it changes a lot about the game.
Yeah. So one other question that we've been asking all of our guests has been, what's the most unruly thing you did this week?
Unruly thing. Well, yeah, I have two toddlers. So basically anything I do, and they're a little older than toddlers, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. So anything I do with them really is on the charts here. But yeah, I'd say I did paid $10 for this bracelet. It's lovely. And my kids have been running around naked all over the place in the heat, and I'm just letting it go.
I think that those are unruly yet extremely relatable and acceptable.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad they fit both buckets.
Yeah, me too. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed talking about this, and I'm excited to see how Gotham does the rest of the season.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's really fun to talk about, and I'm looking forward to getting other people having these same conversations.
Okay, so we're going to do a little exercise called Unruly Rewind, where we ask you some nostalgia-based sports questions.
Okay.
Who was your favorite soccer player growing up?
Michelle Akers.
What's the first game you remember watching?
Oh, so my dad, because I was very serious, but we couldn't watch soccer in the US. Like there wasn't anything we could watch from Europe. My dad found some random streaming thing where we could watch Serie A, which is the Italian league. So I remember watching Parma versus Roma, and I'm not going to do it right now, but we were using very bad Italian accents and we were trying to mimic what we were hearing.
What's the first game you remember playing in?
So I played for the Orange Bullets. That was my rec team. And yeah, we played. I think there were no goalkeepers. I don't even know how many players were on the field. And I didn't know the rules at all. I knew nothing about soccer when I started, but I was in a game.
And that counts. My only memory of a soccer game was I think I went and got on the field and then the ball hit me in the head. And I know now that that's something that's supposed to kind of happen.
Well, it's not supposed to hit you. You're supposed to
hit
head
the ball.
Yes.
Okay, well then that's fair then, because then I went to the bench and I was like, I'm out. I'm not doing it anymore. What's a pregame ritual that kind of stuck with you over the years?
So I was always very calm before the game. I would like to nap and like prepare my body, and I would listen to strangely kind of downer music. Like I wouldn't get pumped up. I wouldn't dance in the locker room or anything like that. I wouldn't do that anyway because I'm bad at dancing. But yeah, I would honestly I would sleep before the game. And I think now I think it was because of my performance anxiety. I actually needed help with that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, very low key resting type behavior.
Who was your favorite player to play against?
So yeah, typically that's not a good thing if you want to play against someone. But I will say, there were a couple times very early in my professional career I got to play against Kelly Smith, who is a very famous English player, one of the best women's players ever. And that for me was really special. She's a player I really admired, and I got to take the field against her. And she definitely ran circles around me and my team at various moments. But it was one of those kind of big moments for me as a new professional to play against someone who I really idolized.
Mm-hmm. Okay, pick one. The Big Green or Bend It Like Beckham?
The Big Green. This is one thing I know a lot about. We could talk about the Big Green, and we could do a whole nother podcast on it.
Yep. Well, I guess we'll have to tack on an additional episode to the season.
I feel I'm very passionate about that question you just asked.
Okay, so what's a moment in women's sports history that you remember witnessing when you were growing up that really like impacted the trajectory of your life or your career?
So I think the common answer will be mine too, and this is the '99 World Cup. And I'd say though, not just the team winning, that was, the culmination of a really momentous event and movement for women's soccer in the U.S. But I got to go watch the team train a little bit ahead of the opening match. The opening match was at what now is MetLife. I don't even know what it was called back then. And I got to watch them train up close and personal. I can still remember, because I was such a sponge for this, I remember the drills they were doing and like some of the things they were doing. And I got to kick the ball back a couple of times to the team. And I felt so tied to that team because I got to see them a little bit. And I got to meet Brandi Chastain before the tournament and she ended up becoming the big star. And that was extremely impactful in my life as a young aspiring athlete.
Was that the tournament, the famous moment?
Yeah.
What do you think of that now?
You mean just her ripping her shirt up?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it's so iconic, and it's such a cultural soccer celebration to take off your shirt.
Yeah.
Now they give yellow card if you do it, so it's changed. But that was the way you celebrate. If you're a footballer, you celebrate like that. So yeah, I think it was a big statement for so many reasons. It's like she just won the World Cup, and that was her first instinct to do, like you'd see the men do, you just rip off your shirt. But yeah, it's such an important moment for so many reasons.
Mm-hmm. And then what advice would you give to yourself as a young athlete?
Yeah, I think I really took the, get comfortable being uncomfortable a little bit too far. I was out of my comfort zone a lot. I think I would go back and say, find a little bit more time where you feel comfortable and supported and not under so much pressure. I really tried to maximize in every way, and a lot of that was very high pressure. And I think I could have done with a bit of the balance.
I think we all need a little bit more balance.
Yeah. I'm not good at balance.
Okay, thanks for playing.
Oh, yeah, that was easier than you. You set me up to be nervous.
I tried to scare
really
you with it first.
Yeah,
but...
you did scare me.